Uhuru. Uhuru. First of all, let me express my deepest appreciation to the African People's Solidarity Committee for carrying out its mandate to do the events in solidarity with African people. I'm happy to be able to participate in this, my second, it's the second one I think I've done this year. And I want to express appreciation to all of you who have come out as well. This issue of solidarity is one that we think is extremely important. And people have, before I have stepped up, talked about how I and the African People's Socialist Party have fought for a long period of time for African liberation. But I would say that while that is true, we have always understood that the struggle of African people is part and parcel of the struggle of oppressed and exploited people all over the world. We understand that there is no history of African people separate and apart from the history of the peoples in the world. We are not like Europeans or Americans who sort of see themselves in isolation from everybody else. We understand that ours is a part of the history of the world. And we also understand that the history of the last period of the world, the history of capitalism, the emergence of capitalism, is one that has defined the relationships of all the people on the planet Earth. That everybody is impacted by this development, this emergence of capitalism. And it's really important for us to understand that these discussions that we're having, I think, are extremely important. These are not just some idealistic discussions, feel-good discussions, but people are offering up, I think, very important analyses. And I'm hoping that there's enough intellectual energy in this room to be able to entertain the analyses that are coming forward. It's not just feel-good speech that people are engaged in making here. And it's important for us to get to the root of the crisis, the root of the contradictions that we're confronted with, the root of this profound contradiction that has existed between black people and white people, for example, in this country. We can't even, we can pretend that it does not exist, but it's here and it has been here. And in many ways, it's a frightening kind of contradiction, perhaps the most profound, perhaps the most frightening contradiction that white people have to deal with, and certainly Africans have had to deal with since our being brought to this country, is this relationship between white people and black people. It's been, if there weren't children in the room, I'd say, it's been a hell of a relationship. And it has been a bloody, brutal relationship. It has been a relationship of the worst kind of slavery, oppression, murder, genocide. That's the nature of the relationship. That's how it's always been. It was that way even when we had so little power that we had to buck dance and sing, songs about mint juleps for the master. It was always that way. And so that's just a reality. And I think everybody kind of knows that. But let's get to the essence of what the contradictions are, because as Comrade Glenn Ford mentioned, I think, in his presentation, that the whole issue of democracy in this country has been one that has been defined by the struggle of black people, by African people. At the time when this country was toying with fascism, at the time when they were electrocuting the Rosenbergs and what have you, at the time when the Communist Party had to go underground, etc., it was in real unity with fascism that existed in Germany and other places that existed in this country. It was the struggle for Africa, by black people, for civil rights that kept the society open. That was the basis for the struggle for democracy in this country. We have been the ones. This incredible African people kidnapped from our homeland, kidnapped. And I think it's important to mention that because people like to fantasize about the nature of this country. They like to talk about how America is a country of immigrants, my ass. Because Africans are not immigrants. We are captives. We were captives when we were brought here. We were a people who did not come here looking for a better way of life, but lost a better way of life as a consequence of having got here. So that's a good starting place. Understand that. We have to understand that. We have to understand when we talk about the Mexicans and the illegal aliens coming across the border, that an actual war that stole California, New Mexico, Nevada, much of the West and Southwest. War took that land, but at gunpoint, and using the same kind of rationale for doing it that America is using in places like Afghanistan and Iraq and other places even today. And now the people whose land, who find themselves landless, right, now are considered illegal aliens for crossing an artificial border that was put there at their expense. And then all the people in this country get fed pablum that they call history. And of course, the ones who have the power are the ones who define what is historically correct and significant. And they have created a history that emerged. They have created a history that actually obscures real relationships in the real world. And because capitalism that is extolled by every president and every pundit of significance in this country has no redeeming qualities. It is a social system that has its origin in genocide and slavery. The question, that could be asked about why is it that white people, this minority population on the planet Earth, is so much better off than everybody else? Why is it that half the people on Earth, live off less than $2 a day? Why is it that so many people on Earth, perhaps most people on Earth, are confronted with the issue of not having clean water? In places where some of the wealth, the most significant resources are concentrated. That is the reality that we're confronted with. That is not normal. And of course, the answer is, if you listen to not only George Bush, who gave a ready answer, it's because we are good, right? Right? And Bush is not far-fetched, because everything that we learn in our experience in this country explains this reality to us. I mean, where do you get the story of a fat white guy living in the North Pole where it's too cold to work, right? Who has these magical elves or something, who create all the goodies, right? And then, every year using a reindeer, reindeer and a sled, run around and drop off nice things to all the good people, right? And of course, what it is part of the philosophical underpinning of this country that explains how wealth is created. It wasn't worked for. You didn't create it, so it came from this fat white guy, this jolly white guy, where it is even too cold to work and it just gets dropped off because we are good. Which is an absurdity, but it feeds into the psyche, it feeds into the philosophical underpinning of this country and this world that we live in, because it's not just here, because actually Santa Claus, comes from Holland, right? From the Netherlands, right? And there's a story to be told about that as well, but I won't belabor the point. The point is that there is a lot of fantastic fluff that poses as history and as explanation for the reality that we are confronted with and are trying to find ourselves out of. Because nobody, I think, in his or her right mind wants to live in this world where there's so much conflict, so much contradiction all the time. We'd rather be able to enjoy this planet Earth and be able to live without fear. And but in order to do that, white people have a lot of work to do in understanding this reality. And at one point, I thought 9/11 would contribute to that. Because when you have power, you don't have to understand anything about anybody else on earth. If you got power, you just take everything for granted. But 9/11, I thought, would be a kind of wake-up call after the initial knee-jerk reaction, go and kill everybody, you know. I thought that it would be possible to have meaningful discussion in this country. Because if, in fact, there are people who are willing to get on an airplane and kill themselves just to make sure that they killed and destroyed white people and things that are important to America, it would seem to me that you'd want to know why the hell that happened. You know, why the hell did it happen? What, talking about fight against terrorism, why the hell is everybody pissed off? It seems to me at some juncture you'd want to know the answer to the question. Why the hell are they pissed off? Why is under every bed I got to look for a so-called terrorist? Right? And, of course, that's not the question that's being debated at all. Even on these news shows where they put up these false, these straw men, what do they call them? The pros and the cons on every question is false, right and left, that they offer up on TV. They don't deal with this question, why? Why is it happening? And the reason why it's happening, of course, is because the whole thing, the whole capitalist world, revolves around being able to extract tremendous amounts of value from oppressed peoples around the world. That there are people who are dying in Afghanistan and Iraq and all over Africa and much of the world so that there can be peaches in the supermarkets in this country regardless of what season it is. You can go and find a peach. You can go and find something that you want. Where you eat better Chinese food than the Chinese eat in China. The fact is that there is this relationship that is here. And it is not something that all of the people decided, Africans in Africa said, hey, 400 years. Can you see it now in a people sitting up in Angola somewhere? 400 years from now, I think they're going to invent the what do you call it? The National Basketball Association, right? Why don't we get a jump on it, right? And go now. That wasn't how it happened. African people were kidnapped, were brought here screaming and yelling. We were not the ones who were jumping on Mayflowers and things like that to get the hell out of an oppressive and sick and dying Europe. That rescued itself through slavery, that rescued itself through colonialism and oppression against the rest of the peoples of the world. And so you have this world now that's created through stealing everything that vast majority of the people need for their existence. South America, for how long was it called the backyard? Isn't that how they characterize it? The backyard of the U.S. and what have you. We were all objects of history. And white people in Europe and here were subjects of history, which makes it extremely difficult today for white people to hear. Because for so long it has been this power, this relationship oppressed and oppressor nations, where those in the oppressor nation have been the subjects of history and have defined the relationship, the world, from its own perspective. And nobody else could talk back because there was always a gunboat in the harbor. There was always Marines. There were always the police. There was always the sheriff or the person who was over the plantation to do something terrible to you if you said something different, right? So nobody else could talk back. But now increasingly, that is changing. The resistance of the peoples around the world is now representing itself in our own articulation of our own reality. And guess what? As we become subjects of history, you become objects of history, and then you hear yourself defined in a fashion you never heard of before. Damn! That's not the me that I thought I was, right? Now the slave can articulate, and damn it, he really doesn't like the slave master no matter what he said in the past. He hates your slave master. That's a natural and normal reaction to the slave master. It is. And so now increasingly people in Afghanistan and people in all these other places, you read about Hugo Chavez in the newspaper. What do they say? He continues to be defiant. What the hell are you talking about defiant? Why the hell is he defiant to whom? What the hell who is he defiant? Like somehow because anybody stands up to the United States, there's some problem in defiant. You know, and all of the red, white, and blue blood pumping through the heart of every loyal, patriotic American, you understand? Defiant. How dare he be defiant? You know? You've seen that kind of language used to talk about grown people who are supposed to be heads of state, of sovereign entities, etc. But it's changed. And the world has changed. And let me just say this really quickly. One thing I just want to speak to, because I know we got a tight agenda, is that Africa and African people suffer an incredible slander. And people who know better allow it to happen for too often. Everybody in this country, no matter how old you are, is familiar with the fact that 30, 40 years ago, the people around the world knew of America for blowing up churches, killing black babies, lynching African people, water hoses, electric prods, and things like that, against people who just wanted to register to join the Democratic Party. They weren't looking for Fidel Castro. They weren't trying to join, some so-called Al-Qaeda. They just wanted to join the damn Democratic Party. And America murdered those people. And not only did America murder them and murdered them to the tremendous silence of the vast majority of the white population in this country. I'm talking about, I know there was this hidden sympathies, and I know 5 people that we all know the same 5 people who went out on the demonstrations and marched with Martin Luther King and stuff like that. Those are the exceptions, but I'm talking about in general, that happened. That was the reality we were confronted with. Everybody knew that. But today, everybody knew what had happened to Africa. When we talk about slavery in America, the fact is that slavery was an attack on Africa. Black people in this country didn't pop up on Mississippi plantations under turnip leaves. And a war was waged against Africa that brought us here. That's what was necessary to get us here, an actual war. People fought to keep their children, their kith and their kin where they were. So here we are. Now, in this place and in this relationship today, and people are struggling to end this kind of relationship. And our movement is opposed and offended by this tremendous slander of African people. So all of a sudden, we look, and now it is not the white people who killed us, enslaved us, and did all these terrible things to us. Now it is young black men in particular who are the terrorists. Everybody's afraid of young black men. Everybody's afraid of the black community. They don't even have to offer a rational excuse. They attacked the Uhuru House 10 years ago in this city and used all the tear gas in the city. All the tear gas that the city had, they used against that building. They said the reason we are doing it is because after murdering Tyrone Lewis, we don't want the people in the Uhuru House to talk about it in the black community. They said that. They attacked our building. The only support that came to us was from the African People's Solidarity Committee. Where were those freedom-loving, constitutional protecting, white people in this country, in this city? All you got to do is say it's in the black community, and everybody knows the black community is riddled with crime. And even that's BS. Crime is where you find it. And if you and I'm talking about crime as defined by the bourgeoisie now. That's what I'm talking about, because there's a crime that if you steal a Pinto, remember a Pinto automobile? If you stole a Pinto made by Ford, if you bump the back bumper like that, pretty solidly, the thing would catch on fire. That was not a crime. Ford didn't commit a crime when he did that. Still won. That was the crime. You understand? That was the crime. So even according to bourgeois law, and everybody knows that law is the opinion of the ruling class, right? Even according to bourgeois law, if you put as many police on every corner in the white community as you put in the African community with the same attitudes that they have in our community, damn it, you'd have more crime in the white community than you have in the African community. Much, much more time. My son was arrested in this city by some 30 armed, ski mask wearing, special weapon carrying cops that shut down the entire African community. They arrested him for marijuana. Well, people shouldn't smoke marijuana. After all, it's illegal. But damn it, if it were illegal and if they were looking for marijuana, why didn't they hit the dorm at the universities here? That's where the best marijuana is located. Everybody knows that. But it's colonialism. It's colonialism. It's colonialism. Don't tell me about I'm a citizen. If I were a citizen, we wouldn't be looking at this difference in how Africans are treated and white people are treated. I'm tired of the slander. I'm tired of looking up and seeing my children going to prison 50, 60, 70 years at 15, 16 years old. It is incredible. You must be opposed to that as well. And finally, I want to say that it's not good enough just to say peace. People like to, peace. I want peace. Hell, George Bush wanted peace. He did. If he'd have been quite satisfied if people stopped fighting and just accepted the imperialist way of life. It's only when people rose up against imperialism that the peace was disturbed. So he wanted an imperialist peace. The slave masters wanted peace. It's only when the slaves rose up that there was no longer peace. It was peaceful until Nat Turner started saying, strike at night and spare no one. It was peace. But damn it, you have to be opposed to injustice. You have to recognize that what is happening to the African community in this country and around the world is wrong. We travel and work in places like Sierra Leone in West Africa, where some of the best diamonds in the world are located and come to this country on a regular basis. People are talking blood diamonds, mine. That is so ridiculous. All of them, all of it's blood diamonds. You're talking about a situation where an African who brings up the diamonds out of the mines in Sierra Leone is paid 32 cents and a cup of rice a day, where they don't even have clean drinking water, don't even have a national electric grid, when all of the diamonds and resources are coming out of there, coming to this country and coming to Europe. And you're talking about an Afrikan, a U.S. military presence to keep it that way. You're talking about a U.S. military, even before an Afrikan, that overthrew and murdered every decent force on the continent of Africa that tried to make Africa belong to African people. That has overthrown governments from one point of the earth to the other as a matter of form on a regular basis. Well, we had to overthrow Saddam. Even if there were no weapons of mass destruction, he was a bad guy. Saddam Hussein couldn't live long enough. Even if he lived long as the mythological Methuselah, he could not have committed as many offenses against humanity as George Washington, who was a slave owner. He couldn't have committed as many offenses as the pedophile Thomas Jefferson, who raped 13-year-old Sally Hemings, who was a slave. And now, after most of the liberals had to admit that he did have this sexual thing with Sally Hennings, who bore him all these children. They now characterize it as an affair. How the hell can a slave master have an affair with a slave? It's not like she can say, "Not tonight, honey, I got a headache." You understand? That doesn't work that way. But Africans have been objects in this fashion, used in this fashion here and around the world, and you must oppose it with all your might. It is not enough to be just for peace. You have to be for justice. You have to unite with the oppressed peoples against their oppression, even if it means uniting against the United States. Yes, you must do that. Yes, you must do that. You must do that. You must do that. Listen, I have to sit down. But before I ever knew a Nicaraguan, I didn't know a Nicaraguan. But when I knew the struggle in Nicaragua was heating up, I was located in California at the time. We turned all the resources of our movement over to the Nicaraguan resistance. I didn't have to know them. Yes. I was opposed to oppression of the Nicaraguan people, and I understood a victory for Nicaragua was a victory for the oppressed peoples around the world. Yes. You have to take that stance. Yes. I don't care if you like me. Yes. I'm not struggling against racism, which is simply the ideas in the heads of people that keep white people in this center. Yes. Whether it's struggling against racism. When you talk about struggling against racism, you know you're talking about struggling against the ideas that white people have about us. Right. How do you struggle against racism? You make white people like you. How do you make white people like you? Well, you learn how to talk right. You learn how to walk right. You know, and you learn how to act right. You know? So if you struggle against racism, you can't pick up a brick, right, and hit a white guy on the head because he won't like you. You understand? You can't do anything to struggle for your freedom that would offend white people because somehow you lose the battle against racism. I'm talking about self-determination. And you have to stand for that. And you must not be afraid of that. You must end this voluntary isolation that white people experience with from the rest of the world. People feed this nonsense. This so-called supremacy, but deep in your heart, you know that's a lie. Yes. Come on, if it was so supreme, you wouldn't have to murder everybody in Rosewood. You wouldn't have to use terror to keep people subjugated and what have you. You wouldn't have to lock up my children. That's not superiority. Get the largest prison system, the second largest prison system in the world. Texas and California are vying for the second largest. They're tied. The second largest prison system in the world. Second to what? To the United States. Texas and California are vying. They are tied for the second largest prison population in the world. And they've got Africans and Mexicans are the most of the people there. Africans who were brought here as captives and who've been fighting and resisting in 1,000 different ways. The African youngster who wears his hat turned to behind him is resisting. The African young man who wears his pants sagging is resisting. The African who talks the way he talks and acts the way he talks and defiant is resisting. Even if it's unconscious resisting, he's resisting. And what our responsibility is to organize that resistance and give it direction and consciousness so that it can fight for its independence. And you must support that. Yes. You have supported Obama. You have supported various, and you know Obama would work for imperialism. Hell, they won't give me $700 million. And I'm much better than Obama. I've been working all my life for justice and freedom. They won't give me $700 million. So why the hell they give Obama $700 million? You know the Democratic Party is an imperialist party. You know it's never been a revolutionary party. It's been the party of George Wallace and Jesse Jackal and all of those other frauds who attempt to convince people they represent the people. So what you have to do is all that support you've been giving to them. You've got to bring it to a genuine struggle to emancipate our people. And this is something, and I will sit down, that you know is true. because you can see it concretely. I'm not just blowing smoke. You can find the institutions that we've created that contribute to this question of self-determination that we're talking about. You can see our presence all over the continent of Africa. You can see what we're trying to do in Colombia with African people who are there, in the Bahamas and other places where black people are located and throughout this country. And also you can see the solidarity movement that we're developing here. I want to express my appreciation to the African People's Solidarity Committee, to Comrade Penny Hess, who is one person who has more political integrity than most people I've ever met in my life, who has made a genuine commitment and incredible leader. And I also encourage all of you to buy that book that's been talked about that she wrote, Overturning the Culture of Violence. And then perhaps you can help us to overturn the culture of violence, you understand? Because we don't want that. We want to have a decent life, but it's never going to be the same again. And I'm hoping that North Americans and Europeans can really come to grips with this fact. It's never, ever, ever going to be the same again. The genie is not going to be put back in the bottle. The economy is not going to be the same again. A U.S. president is not going to be able to call up somebody and say, shut up in South America, and they're going to do it just because it's said. The white man is not going to be able to show up and people are going to throw out their guns and run away. That's over. It's never, ever going to be the same again. And what you need to do is stop being fodder for imperialist wars and to protecting the imperialists. Let them fend for themselves. Let them fend for themselves. Join the rest of humanity. Let's take these suckers down. Let's fight for the right of all people to be self-determining. That's the only way we're going to ever be able to create this world without borders that all of us want. Don't you want a world without borders? Well, in order to have this world without borders, the peoples of the world have to fight to free themselves as peoples, and you who live at the expense of the peoples of the world have to join that struggle against our common oppressor. That way we can all be free. Thank you so much, Uhuru.